Hey, I'm glad you're here. You are eavesdropping on my conversations with everyday adults about coping with the tough stuff and how they got from bad to better. I'm Brandy Menifee, and these are coping stories. Today, I'm having a candid conversation with Scott about a challenging chapter in his life and how he coped. In November 2018, Scott's home burned in the Woolsey Fire, which started in LA County and spread to Ventura County. The Woolsey Fire took 13 days to contain. 295,000 people evacuated, and 3 people died. It burned nearly 97,000 acres. It destroyed 1,623 structures, including most of Scott's house, where he had lived for 12 or 13 years. Scott shares the books, the songs, and the thing he did every day that helped him cope with the trauma and grief of losing almost everything in the Woolsey Fire. Scott and I recorded this conversation 1 week after multiple wildfires started ravaging Los Angeles in 2025. Our intention in posting it as a podcast is to offer comfort and support to anyone experiencing fire loss in Los Angeles or elsewhere. Do you find that it's easy or hard for you to talk about your experience with fire loss?
Honestly, it's usually surprising in the sense that I may get emotional right now even. It usually brings up things that were unexpected, but I think in a healthy way. It's kind of a combination of PTSD and therapy, I guess.
Your home burned in a wildfire.
It was the Woolsey Fire, which broke out on November 8th, 2018. The night before that, in Thousand Oaks, there was a massacre at the Borderline Bar. There were 13 deaths and 16 injuries. So you had victims that had escaped this mass shooting, having to now evacuate from a fire. I happened to be home on the 8th. I just happened to be home. So I was watching the news, also because of Borderline, but then the Hill Fire broke out in the morning. A couple hours later, my ex-wife and my kids were in Oak Park. And I called my ex-wife and said, "Hey, do you smell smoke?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Why don't you grab the kids and come to my house?" And so they evacuated to my place. And then the fire started spreading through Bell Canyon and then Oak Park, and it was going towards Thousand Oaks. And now the Hill Fire was kind of under control at this point, but they didn't really have enough assets to kind of come over and control the Woolsey Fire. So it was moving really quickly. My girlfriend at the time was living in Thousand Oaks, and I talked to her. They were under evacuation, and so she and her daughter evacuated to my house too. So I had my dog, 2 cats, my ex-wife, my 2 kids, my then girlfriend, and her daughter at my house. And at that time, we were directly south of kind of the ignition point, and there was really no way that it was possible that it could come threaten my area, but it did.
How? If you thought it was nearly impossible, what happened?
We hear all the time in the news now, right, that these fires, once they get big enough, create their own weather systems. So I think what ended up happening was the fire got so large that even though the winds with the predictability of the fire were blowing mostly west, southwest, all of a sudden they just started coming directly south. And all of us, we kind of started taking turns watching the news. I was really stressed out, and I was actually asleep. It was my then girlfriend's turn to kind of watch the news at the time. And so I got woken up, and this is about, I don't know, maybe 3:30 in the morning. The fire had gone south to the 101 at around, I guess, near Chesborough. And I was kind of like, okay, they can't let it jump the 101. There's no way they're going to allow that to happen. But they didn't have like a ton of fire trucks there. And I just said to them, listen, if it jumps the 101, we're going to have to evacuate because they're not going to stop it. It'll go all the way to the ocean. It jumped the 101, and then instantly Southern California Edison turned out the power to the entire area. And so everything just went black.
Do you remember what you were doing when everything went black?
We were starting to gather things at that time because we had animals there, medications, just the basic stuff that, you hear you need to take. We started gathering some of that stuff. And then when everything, it went completely pitch black, we did the best we could with flashlights and, things like that to continue, because then we were in evacuation mode at that point.
And what time of day was this?
This would have been roughly around 4 a.m. at this point.
It's hard to imagine the stress and panic of knowing that you have to evacuate. How do you even know how much time you have?
You don't. And honestly, one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't take more time. And I'm not recommending that to anybody. So that's not a recommendation. It's just that when you have a group of people, different personalities tend to deal with a situation like this differently. So there was a much larger urgency to evacuate than was actually needed. And also, honestly, when you evacuate, you don't ever imagine. I mean, you kind of a tiny part of you thinks you won't come back to your house, but really you're kind of going, okay. uh, like I remember, somebody at the house saying, hey, should we grab that painting? You know, and I was like, yeah, because that's something we couldn't even fathom losing. But there were lots of things we didn't get, that you just think, okay, well, you don't need to grab those things. So it was a combination of feeling the stress of, hey, we need to go now. And also just, we're going to come back.
Did you see the flames as you were leaving your home?
Yes, yes. You do at that point feel really genuinely threatened. By that point, we had everything kind of in the cars and we're ready to go. But then that's when, the embers and stuff you hear about that are kind of so dramatic for people are like blowing at these hurricane force winds everywhere. It's otherworldly, honestly. It's hard to kind of understand it unless you've been in it. Even like watching video of it doesn't really capture the scope. If you go out on a wide shot and, and we were all like seeing the current fires and how horrible it is and how like massive the scale is, when you're actually standing in it, the scope is just so much larger than you can imagine.
Seeing the flames as you were leaving your house, was that the most terrifying moment?
No, I think the most terrifying moment for me, it just in a sense, was because we were evacuating in 3 cars because, there was kind of a gathering of people there at the house. So, I mean, it was terrifying. I didn't doubt we were going to get out because I knew all the escape routes from where we were going. I knew we were going to be able to get out. One of the scarier moments for me was we were driving south along PCH and all of Malibu had been evacuated by that point, or it was under mandatory evacuation. So the PCH was just gridlocked. It was like a parking lot. And so I made the decision to have all of us turn back towards the fire because I was like, in my head, I was thinking, if we're here on the PCH and this thing comes all the way through down here and we're stuck here, we're going to have to be out on the beach. Where are we going to go? And so we actually drove up to Mulholland Highway and we could see the fire, but it wasn't a threat to us. And so we pulled over at this kind of vista that I know about. And one of the scariest things was at that time, the fire plume was kind of standing more straight up. And then the plume just all of a sudden just dropped like a plank. And so the winds either inside the system itself got so crazy, but it was like literally the plume was now blowing absolutely horizontal. And that's when I thought, oh boy, our area's probably in bad trouble.
Now, I need to back up just for a second. You've got 3 cars. Are you guys caravanning and trying to stay
Yes,
together?
we are. Yes.
So then how are you communicating when you hit, PCH and it's a parking lot and you're like, no, we don't want to get stuck. For me, I'm thinking, how does that go smoothly? I mean, in my imagination, it's just like pure chaos screaming at each other.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's funny you say that. It didn't go smoothly. And we were talking on cell phones. And honestly, what ended up happening is we got separated. And that was the most terrifying thing. What happened was I, in my car, and my then girlfriend turned left, but my kids were in my ex-wife's car and they refused to turn. I thought they were going to go, but they didn't. And so when we got up to the top, they weren't there. They were still on PCH and blocked in at that point. So I got into Woodland Hills and we went to the shelter at Pierce College, I think it was at the time, and it was full. It was completely packed already, and there were animals, all kinds of animals there, from horses to anything you can imagine, and people just, on the floor, on cots. We eventually found a motel outside Woodland Hills. I got super lucky. We found a motel with 2 adjacent rooms. And so I put down the money for that, and I didn't say anything about the fact we had animals, and just tried to stay on communication with my kids and their mom. And eventually, about 5 hours later, they arrived safely. That was the scariest part for me.
Those 5 hours.
Yes, because we were able to communicate by cell phone. I didn't think they were in any serious threat ever, luckily. But being separated was not good. That was something I wished wouldn't have happened. Even before I was reunited with the kids and their mom, they had decided to go into Starbucks because they were hungry. They were excited. You can imagine, they'd been through the whole thing, been on the road, and our dog was with them at the time. And so they wanted to go in. They wouldn't allow dogs in, so they asked somebody to hold the dog, outside at one of the seating areas outside. And when they went in, our poor dog, because, the animals really, they pick up on all this horrible stress. So he freaked out, and he was in a harness, and he somehow was able to get himself out of his harness. And so he was loose. And so he's running everywhere. They come out, and they're like, where is he? And they're like, I got it. So they're panicking. Now, I didn't witness any of this, but this is like a story that's been told over and over by my kids. So he's out running across like one of the busiest intersections, in the valley, like Topanga and Ventura Boulevard, going crazy looking for them, and almost got hit by a car several times. Poor guy soiled himself. He was just, so scared. They eventually got him. They're able to yell, get his attention, and he came. So that was one of those things that we always look back on like, oh my gosh, would this memory be even that much different if that something had happened to him? So they told me that story when we were reunited.
Wow. What kind of dog?
Well, we thought he was a purebred Bichon. He's a rescue, and he was surrendered. But he's a half miniature poodle, half like 5 other things. Like just a great mutt. He's a great dog. He's 11 now, and he's a fantastic dog. I was never like into little dogs that much, but he's an old soul, this dog. There's a little man in there somewhere.
We forget how affected pets are to not only just be displaced, but picking up on your energy and everybody else's energy. What a horrible moment.
Yeah, and then they're animals. Their instincts are much better than ours. They smell the smoke. They're getting what's going on, and you're right. And on top of that, they're super sensitive to all the energy of the people they love.
How long did you stay at the motel?
Luckily, not real long, because one of the things that I'm sure a lot of people hopefully are going through right now, and one of the things that you do experience and that's this positive is there's a lot of love. And, you have to try to be humble as best you can and accept it. Everybody should take as much love and hugs and offers and anything they can in this time. It's not a time to be, hey, I can take care of myself. Luckily, one of my closest friends' brother and wife were living in the West Side at the time, and they found out about what was going on. So I think we were in the hotel for maybe 2 or 3 nights at the most. And they offered to let us stay at their house. And so, that was fantastic. Like arriving there was such a huge relief and so beautiful. And just to be in a house, and they had a spot for everybody to stay. And, they were so welcoming that was really pretty amazing. And we didn't stay there long because luckily both my then girlfriend's home and my ex-wife's home were safe. And so their evacuations were lifted and they were able to return home. And that's an absolute blessing. That was a massive relief for me because I don't know how I could have gotten through this. I mean, I know this sounds strange, but I was happy I was divorced at the time because it was like the kids had 2 homes and they had a lot of stuff in their mom's home. Matter of fact, probably most of their stuff was in their mom's home. And so they were able to go back to that home, and have some sense of normalcy.
How did you find out the fate of your home?
When we were at the hotel, a neighbor that had stayed behind to try to defend his house took a video of my house and texted it to me. And seeing it on a video is kind of weird. Like you don't really believe, it's real, but you don't really believe it. I wasn't supposed to, but I hiked in for a few miles before everything was lifted just to see it for myself because I wasn't going to believe it, to see it with my own eyes. Even though I knew what it was, because I had to hike in through the fire footprint, right? So it's just unbelievable, the stench. It wasn't cold Santa Ana's, it was hot. So it was really hot. Steel bridge that was in my neighborhood was melted by the ferocity of the fire. So that was stunning. That was by Peter Strauss, which is a park that was completely decimated by the fire. And so when I finally got up to the house, it was just, okay, this is real, it actually happened. Even then, you don't really fully take it in. It takes years to kind of understand it and let it go. I kind of thought that for sure some homes in my neighborhood would be affected. I didn't know it would be mine. I think part of the feeling was that a feeling of just that something had been permanently canceled in your soul in a way. In my case, this is a home I had dreamt about having all my life. I had worked towards something like this. My kids had grown up there. There were so many memories and things there, and so much, I've been somebody that's been lucky enough in my life to travel to over 60 countries. I had mementos from most of the places I had been. My garage was still there. And there were some items in the garage I was able to save. My motorcycle, my dad's tool chest, who my dad had just passed away, and some things that really meant a lot to me that I got to have that a lot of people did not get to have. And I look back on that with more humility now. One of the most traumatic things in my experience was having to go back to, lack of a better term, the scene of the crime. It's like a bit like visiting a grave. It can be, healing and sometimes it can just be devastating. It's in a fire situation, you kind of are forced, if you're going to rebuild, especially, to go back to that scene over and over and over again. And it is really draining.
You had said that, this is the moment for you to, accept all the help and accept all the love coming your way. How hard or easy is that to do?
I think it was hard at first, and then it became easier. There was a big store that was empty at the time and wasn't leased. And so some people in the community got together and they started just bringing things there. And so I got Christmas decorations that I still have to this day, clothes. Once I started seeing my kids pick clothes, from the racks and get some joy out of that, or I don't know, just, it sounds weird, but I think it was almost like thrifting to them. That's when it just cracked open for me. I was like, okay, this is okay. These people are really trying to help. They want to help. They want to help. This helps them. I have to be open to all of this. My kids were the ones that, cracked it open for me because I was trying to be tough dad that's got it all in control and I'm going to take care of everything. Don't worry about it. But you know what? That's not the way it works. I realized that to be a really good dad, I need to accept as much help as I could possibly get.
What an amazing lesson.
Yeah, it was. I hope if I come away with two things from what I went through, I hope it's made me a more humble and empathetic human being. That would be my hope. That would be the positives that I hope I came away with.
Recently with, all of Los Angeles being on fire, what's the first thing that flooded your mind?
It's funny. I've got a group of friends of mine and we're constantly texting each other. And one of them reached out to me about that immediately. How are you feeling? Seeing it all unfold was a kind of a combination of PTSD and therapy in the sense of empathy. I found myself crying many times, even me just voice texting something to somebody about them, I'll start crying.
How did you cope in the aftermath of the wildfire?
There was a couple things that really helped me through this. Somebody had given me a book called When Things Fall Apart, Hard Advice for Difficult Times by Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist monk. That was really helpful to me. The Tao Te Ching was really helpful for me. The thing that was remarkable to me in that book was that, when you study the idea of meditation or things like that, typically, the idea is you're breathing in good energy, you're putting out, you're getting rid of your bad stuff from you, right? And you're putting out, that's what I had always known. Her exercise was kind of the opposite. It was, you are not alone. You are surrounded by people that have gone through very similar things to what you are going through. Breathe that in and breathe good out to them. And what I found was during this, I found times where I would get emotional in places that I didn't feel were appropriate because you're just so overwhelmed. And so what I did is I allowed myself a time every day set aside to where I would do a certain meditation, and I would just think about all the people that have gone or were going through something similar to what I was going through. And I would do that meditation and breathe that in and breathe out love to them. And I would cry. And I would let myself cry for as long as I needed to. And that helped a lot. And I would say that I just circle back to that because in the time when I was going through it, that's what I did. But that's kind of what this experience is like for me too. When I see these fires, it's like that again. But, I just feel so much for these people that are going through this. And I'm sure it somehow touches on things unresolved for me too. It's complicated. I don't know what the emotional triggers exactly are, but I know there's a lot of empathy there for sure.
Wow. I love that you took that time every day to hold space for yourself and everyone else. That is incredible.
It was really important to me. It helped a lot. I think, I would have gone into darker places if I hadn't done that. I'm a person that doesn't like to necessarily be out of control with their emotions. So it was hard. I didn't like getting really emotional at just random times. I mean, I still do get emotional at random times when it comes to the fires. And that's one of the most surprising things about it to me. But yeah, that process really helped me to just set aside some time each day. Okay, you're going to take some time to grieve.
Yeah.
Those grief bursts can come out of nowhere. And my experience with grief is that, it can be, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, or, minutes or hours. It can happen in, aisle 4 of Trader Joe's. Like it's, grief is a trip that way. It's constantly surprising me.
That's right. And I tried to limit the aisle 4 in Trader Joe's.
Were there other ways of coping, through like the different stages of grief?
Yes, music was a big thing for me. My kids know that there are like 3 songs I can listen to on probably a loop that'll always make me feel good. And one is Golden Brown by the Stranglers. The other one is Lotus Feet by John McLaughlin. And the other one is Hidden by Roy Buchanan. I could put those on a loop and listen to them, and they all, would make me feel good. But I listen to a lot of music. I have a playlist just called Hammock that's got thousands of songs in it that would be something I would imagine I would want to listen to laying in a hammock. So that was helpful for me, listening to music, but also, I ended up creating. Creating was important. I ended up creating an album called Woolsey, actually, and released it in 2020 during the early stages of COVID and donated all the proceeds to Direct Relief, which was one of the better found charities that I had found with my experience in the Woolsey Fire. We were able to raise some money for them.
That must have felt really good.
It did. And the process of doing that was good too. It was a lot of work, but I think it helped me get through it. There was an art show in Malibu and in Thousand Oaks, both, of artists that had put together, and my then girlfriend was one of the artists that did that. And she took some, lack of a better term, rubble from the fires and created these beautiful pieces of jewelry and things from it. There were other people that had, paintings and all kinds of different things to express, their emotions about or feelings, both joyful and painful, about their experiences. And that was really healing because that was like another community thing. I went there fairly recently. Two of my best friends were visiting, and I had not gone up to the area for quite a while, but we had heard that Peter Strauss had reopened, so we wanted to go up there and check it out. And they were like, "Hey, let's drive up and see the house." And I had seen that the house had been rebuilt. We drove to the end of the road where the home was, and there was a father and his young son playing out in the yard. And it was beautiful to see, somebody was there and they were raising a family like I had. All of a sudden started to get really emotional, and it was completely unexpected. I did not expect it at all. And when I got in the car with my two friends, I just started bawling. Like it was just, and I think it was so many mixed up emotions. One, just seeing them there, enjoying the place, which was great. But then just I don't know why I got so emotional, to be honest. I still to this day don't know why. But that was, I haven't been back since.
Now, we talked earlier about how, different people, different brains, different personalities respond differently in a crisis situation. And I know you have a lot of loved ones who are attached to that home. So since the fire, how has everybody been doing with that loss? Whether it's the loss of the home or the trauma.
In the immediate aftermath, one of my loved ones had to go into a residential mental health facility. And that's something that I think people need to realize is that, these kind of, any traumatic event, right? A divorce, a death of a loved one, anything is always going to be related to some mental health issue in some way. And this kind of trauma and disaster is definitely going to have a mental health fallout. There's no way around it. I think, everybody just needs to acknowledge that in themselves and to everybody around them. Everybody's health long-term is affected in some way. And I'm sure in ways that I don't even understand.
How would you say this experience with losing your home in that wildfire has impacted and shaped your life in the 6 years since?
The main thing I would hope is that it's made me a more empathetic and humble person. And that would be the main thing I would take away from it. These situations are not only about baptism by fire, but they're also about rising from the ashes. It's kind of both things. You're kind of reborn whether you want to be or not, and you got to kind of, come out of it, and you're going to be different. And everybody needs to know that. It's not going to be the same. It doesn't mean it's going to have to be, worse either. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you're never going to be able to get back to the same. You have to let that go. Whether you're rebuilding your home or not, your neighborhood's not going to be the same. You're not going to be the same. This is going to impact you permanently. Take time to grieve. It's really, really important. Give yourself some space during the day. If, hugging somebody, or if you want to be by yourself and just let things out, that's more comfortable for you, whatever it takes. You're in shock right now. You're in shock, and you should be. That's normal. But at some point, you're going to need to try to, able to move forward. You're going to need to let some of this stuff go and grieve. If you need to hug someone you love and just collapse in their arms and cry, then do that. If you need to create a space for yourself where you can cry on your own, if it's out in your car, you take a drive somewhere and you park and you listen to something that, the one that always gets me is Ruby's Arms by Tom Waits. I cannot make it through that song without crying. So if I need a good cry, put that song. Whatever it takes, make sure you take some time for yourself and experience love. There is a lot of love out there right now for you. A lot of love. There's a lot of empathy out there. You're going to experience best and the worst in humanity in this. Try to minimize the worst the best you can and try to embrace the best. because there's a lot of it out there. One just simple story that I have about that is I was at the Residence Inn and I was doing my laundry one night and there was a woman in there and we started chatting. She was asking me about the fires, but then she told me she was an insurance adjuster. And I said, why are you still here? All the other adjusters have left. My insurance adjuster went back east long ago. She says, oh yeah, no, I'm from North Carolina. But I said, well, Thanksgiving's coming up. Aren't you going to go back? No. Well, what about the holidays? No, I'm not going back. Well, what about your family? Yeah, my family's going to miss me. Well, why aren't you going home? And she just started crying. And she said, I have to stay. I'm going to be here through the first of the year. I cannot leave. If I was going through what you're going through, I would want somebody that was here at the location, helping out the best I possibly could. And that was one of the most moving things that I went through, because here I was looking at somebody that was going to not be with their loved ones for the holidays, not be in their home, was living in the Residence Inn, was going to be there longer than me. And they were choosing to do it. They weren't forced to do it. They were choosing it out of their humanity. And so that really moved me. And there's a lot of, that's just one story. You're going to run into a lot of that. You're going to run into things where people do things that you're going to hold on the rest of your life. I think one of the lessons for me was that despite a lot of things that go on, we remain humane. And that's one of the lessons I took from this too, is that you will see your own humanity in this and you'll see it in others. And there's going to be a lot of positive things to this. There's going to be some gifts that you can't expect yet. And, the wrapping on this gift is as bad as it possibly could be. But don't be afraid to open it up, because the things that you might discover inside could be transformative in a good way.
I really appreciate Scott sharing his personal experience and how he's coped with the trauma and pain of losing his home in a wildfire. I'm adding the link to Scott's album he recorded, titled Woolsey, so you can give it a listen. My hope is that Scott's story, or his coping mechanisms, or his album bring you some comfort. This was part 1 of Scott's story. Part 2 is a whole separate episode dedicated to Scott reviewing his Fire Survivor Action Plan, which is a to-do list of actionable steps plus practical logistical advice for anyone experiencing fire loss or preparing for future wildfires. That's the next episode. I'm really glad you stuck around. Thanks for listening to Coping Stories. And one last thing. If you're looking to hire someone to facilitate conversations about sensitive subject matter, or you need to hire a trauma interviewer, or you're interested in becoming my memoir client, or you want to share about a challenging chapter in your life and how you coped, either for this podcast or for my written mental health storytelling series, find me on Instagram @mentalhealthstoryteller, or contact me through my website, prostorytellers.com. And of course, there's always LinkedIn.